Let me tell you something, Ryan. I've seen some toxic offer sheets in my career, and this was not one of them. This was a very clean offer sheet, and it was an easy match for the Suns. No player option, no trade bonus, no shenanigans with the pay schedule. This was the Pacers putting them to the test, saying, are you really going to stop doing this to try to maintain the KD sweepstakes? The answer was no. We're keeping him. They matched it literally in minutes. Big day for DeAndre Ayton. What does it mean for Donovan Mitchell? It means Donovan Mitchell's chances of becoming a Knick just increased. They were already the favorites, but there were scenarios where Donovan Mitchell could be involved in 3 and 14 trades to get him to Brooklyn, who was looking for a young star in return for Kevin Durant. This is a young star, 25 years old. The Knicks are in position. Will they meet Utah's price? That's what we're going to be watching very closely in the coming days. There's action on Donovan Mitchell. As for Kevin Durant, here's what there is. Nothing. There is no movement here. The executives are leaving Summer League. The executives are going on vacation. At this point, the Nets' preferred situation is for Kevin Durant to stay with them. There is no trade that they've got that they like. The huge question, and what the league in some ways is waiting for, is what does Durant feel? He was the one who asked for the trade, Ryan. Has his feelings changed with some of the avenues for trades dimming?
Wow, that's the big question. And by the way, when you talk about him possibly staying there, Hall of Famer Jerry West thinks that might be the case. He was on Sirius XM NBA radio. He gave his thoughts on Kevin Durant's trade request. Remember, they go way back. He knew him in Golden State, all of that. Take a listen to what he had to say.
For him to want out, I can see why. I can see why. Wherever he goes, or to my best guess, he'll be in. He's not going to get traded. You can't give enough to get a guy like him. He's one of the greatest players ever played the game, period.
See, I think that's such an interesting point right there, because the idea being he is worth so much, it's going to be hard for them to move on from him, and it's going to be hard for him to move. So, Nick Friedel, I'll start with you. Do the Nets run it back with KD and Kyrie?
Ryan, they'd love to run it back with Kevin. Where I get stuck, having been around that team the last few months and watched all the destruction that occurred behind the scenes, is whether or not they would run it back with Kyrie. That's where I think the Nets have an issue, and this ties exactly into what Brian was saying. The question here is twofold. One, would Durant actually come back to Brooklyn? Two, would he come back to Brooklyn without Kyrie? That is what only he knows right now, and at some point he's going to have to convey to the Nets. If he would, I think that's Brooklyn's dream scenario to start the season, because Sean Marks talked about the culture they want to grab back. If you deal Kyrie to L.A. or anywhere else and you start the season with Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, and that strong core that's in place, you've got a chance. But I have a tough time believing that Kevin and Kyrie will be there to start next season.
Okay. And Canty, we brought you in here because we wanted to, you're big in the New York market.
Yep.
You know these teams. So when you look at this situation, do you see this happening, the two of them coming back, or do you think it's better off if maybe Kyrie's out?
Man, they're coming back. They don't have any choice. The Brooklyn Nets have all the leverage in the world in this situation, and I get it. The NBA is star-driven, and stars typically get what they want when they ask to be traded. But stars don't usually have 4 years remaining on their contract. And if everybody that knows Kevin Durant, that covers Kevin Durant, says this guy loves the hoop, there's no chance that he's going to sit out this season. He's 34 years old and at the height of his powers. So the Brooklyn Nets, if they can't find the deal that's going to net them the return that they're looking for in order to rebuild this team quickly to have sustained winning, then Kevin Durant is going to be on the squad. And Kevin Durant was always going to be the first of the two big players in Brooklyn moved. And because they can't necessarily find that match, Phoenix now off the market, at least for the time being because of the Ayton signing, I could see a world where KD and Kyrie decide, at least for the beginning of the season, we're going to play in Brooklyn.
So I like where this is going. Nick's saying he can't imagine Kyrie coming back. You're saying both of them come back. Wendy, settle it for us. How do you think this plays out? Because, look, I don't even know if KD is going to now say it's contingent on Kyrie staying, or he needs to go because I want to, if I stay.
Ryan, as you can imagine, I spend a lot of time each day talking to people all over the league about this exact situation. And here's where I've gotten to. I'm not going to make an assumption on anything about Kevin Durant. And I wish I could give a firmer, more well-rounded answer here, but I'm not going to assume how he's going to feel, how he has felt. It isn't 100% clear to me. It might not even be 100% clear to the Nets exactly why he asked out. And so I am not going to try to guess at where his emotions and his feelings are. But what I can tell you is that's what it's going to come down to. I understand what Canty is saying. The Nets contractually have the advantage, but ultimately it's a players-driven league where the player gets to decide, and we have seen it over and over and over again. The contract is secondary when you have the clout.
Yeah, the ultimate leverage he has is saying, look, I'm not coming in until you do something. And then that changes everything. But again, we don't know where KD stands, so that's what everybody's looking for. Okay, so from the current Nets to a former Net. After a disappointing season in Philly, James Harden spoke with Hot Time, did I say that right? Hate Time, Hot Time, about how he is using the offseason to get back to an elite level. Take a listen to this. He says, I've had the luxury of not having to deal with any serious injuries, with surgeries and whatnot, my entire career. But these last 2 years, I've been dealing with some hamstring issues, which are nothing to play with. So I'm taking this summer as an opportunity to do something for me, to make sure I get back to the elite level that I know I can be at and that I will be at. Music to the ears of Sixers fans like me. And Wendy, I got to ask you, Harden, what is the latest? We go from there to big news in the NBA. Last night, the Suns matched the Pacers' 4-year, $133 million offer sheet for restricted free agent DeAndre Ayton. So here's the deal. Ayton stays in Phoenix, but the Suns can't trade him until January 15th, and that's going to have an impact on the KD sweepstakes. So let's bring back in Wendy and Nick Friedel. And Wendy, I'll start with you. What is the impact that Ayton's offer sheet now has on KD?
It doesn't eliminate it at all, Ryan, but it certainly diminishes it. By matching this offer sheet, the Suns cannot trade DeAndre Ayton until after January 15th, and he's got veto power on trades for the next year. He was a big piece that they wanted to put in a deal for Kevin Durant. Even if he wouldn't end up in Brooklyn, they wanted to use him so that they didn't have to use any of the other valued assets they have on their roster. And frankly, that's why the Pacers put them to the test. They signed this offer sheet because they thought maybe they wouldn't want to close down Durant avenues, and they matched it within minutes. And I think what that tells you is right now, not only are the Suns nowhere near any traction on a deal with the Nets for Durant, but they're not even sure any traction is going to come. So they had to take care of their center from their 64-win team and live to fight another day on the Durant front.
Wow, so a big development on the KD front. Nick, I wonder if this affects KD's desire to be a Sun.
Ryan, Kevin knows the league inside and out. And he also knows that there are not as many ways for Phoenix to make it happen now because they've made this move. So he's watching this very closely, just like the rest of us. But there's no question. If you're Kevin Durant and you know there's not a space right now to get you there, he's got to be sitting there wondering, all right, do I really still want to push to go there? Or is there more of a chance potentially for me to at least start the season in Brooklyn? And I know the Nets are hoping that, and it's hope right now, but they're hoping that that is the choice he decides to make. But he is well aware of the environment across the league. And if the Nets don't feel like they're getting enough back, they're not in any rush to move him right now.
Okay, hope being the key word there. We'll see if the Nets can apply that hope to KD and say, hey, come back, let's run it back. But then there's another big free agent on the market, Wendy, and that's Donovan Mitchell. What's the impact of the Ayton deal on Mitchell?
Yeah, I think this increases the Knicks' odds. They were already the favorites, but now without really the much ability for a three-way trade involving the Suns and Nets where Ayton would be potentially used in that deal, I think it makes more sense for the Knicks to, buckle into the negotiation with the Jazz. Really, this is going to be about the price. The Knicks want him badly. The Jazz are prepared to trade him to New York. It's how can they figure out the cost in those draft picks. The price of stars has gone up over the last month. It's like inflation in our economy. 3-4 weeks ago, 3 first-round draft picks probably got you a serious conversation for Donovan Mitchell. But in the wake of the Jazz deal with Rudy Gobert, where they got 4 picks, the Jazz are expecting to get more than that, and the Knicks have 8 to trade. And so over these next few days and weeks, we're going to see proposals going back and forth between those two teams. It has already started, and there are other suitors as well. But you can, I think, cross off the Nets to a certain extent when winding up with Donovan Mitchell in some sort of Kevin Durant trade at this point.
I'm smiling because my mind is blown over the prospect of going over 4 picks, the Knicks having 8. Nick, we're talking, what, 5, 6 first rounders? Can you imagine, is this going to be a good deal if the Knicks pull that trigger?
Hell no. Right. I mean, if you're Tibbs, you're sitting there going, okay, we got to make this work. We got to get Donovan, whatever it takes. You think I care about picks 5 years from now? Of course not. But the reality is, if you make this deal and you're the Knicks, you are capping yourself with what you have in place at a second-round team. So I understand the push to want to get a star. I just don't understand the price that it would take to make it happen. There are a lot of people around the league, I'm sure, who are cursing out Danny Ainge right now because of the Gobert deal and now because of the Mitchell deal and the picks that are involved. But Ainge is used to it. This is what he does. He tries to maximize value and in doing so, get as many picks as possible. If you're the Knicks, though, Ryan, what other options do you have to try and land that guy to build around? I would expect right now for them to get it done, but that is a huge price to pay with all that draft capital.
Indeed it is. Wendy, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. The Knicks have been so starved for a star of this level. This is a guy from the New York area. It lines up. It's going to